This channel is called Tales from My Spinner Rack for a reason. So let's take a little spin around some of the covers of the comics currently residing on my very own spinner rack, including a few that have some special memories for me. Here are some of my favorite spinner rack covers, and be sure to stay tuned until the end for a big original art reveal concerning one of the covers in this video. Welcome back to Tales from My Spinner Rack. I'm Gary Sassman, the former Director of Programming and Publications for Comic-Con International San Diego, and this is episode 15 of my ongoing series of videos about the comic books I loved while growing up in the 1960s and 70s. Before we dive into this episode, if you could please take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications for new Spinner Rack videos, and leave a like or a comment if you enjoyed this episode. It would be greatly appreciated. We're rapidly approaching 1,000 subscribers. Thank you for joining us. Here is the state of my spinner rack circa December 2024. I change books out every few months or so, and I take advantage of the relatively deep pockets on all four sides, which hold about 7 regular comics each, or about 3 or 4 25 centers, what we used to call giants. So with 40 pockets, 10 per side, that's about 250 comics on the rack at any given time, I guess. Don't check my math. And by the way, just about all the covers seen in this post are scanned from my own collection, so some of them are a little, let's say, rough condition-wise. One book even fell apart into a stack of separate pages as I unbagged it to scan it. In the years that comics were sold primarily on newsstands and mom-and-pop candy stores, the popular belief was that the covers sold the book. Publishers and editorial directors like Irwin Donenfeld and Carmine Infantino at DC, and Martin Goodman and Stan Lee at Marvel thought that a great cover sold more issues. And with so many comics on the newsstand racks, the covers had to really pop. I've already discussed Donenfeld's surefire list of things on covers that sold comics. Back in episode 3, Jimmy and Lois Still Crazy After All These Years, which included gorillas, dinosaurs, motorcycles, a purple background, a city in flames, the hero crying, and a direct question to the reader. Well, you probably won't see a lot from that list here, but I'm sure at least one purple cover and a giant gorilla will show up before we're done. So without any further ado, let's look at some of my favorite covers in my collection, fresh off the spinner rack. Let's start with DC Comics and a cover that means a lot to me. Superman number 146, July 1961, which features the complete story of Superman's life. I absolutely love this Kurt Swan's cover, inked by Sheldon Moldoff. So much drama, action, and tragedy all rolled up in one image. Baby Kal-El, alone and forlorn in his little one-seater rocket. Jor-El and Lara tearfully saying goodbye. Fire, buildings collapsing, and bullet points. Who doesn't love a cover with bullet points? It's the comic book equivalent of a PowerPoint presentation. How Superman came from Krypton to Earth. How he gained his amazing superpowers. How he assumed the secret identity of Clark Kent. How he met Krypto, the superdog. How kryptonite can destroy him. All breathlessly told for the first time. There's not enough exclamation points left in the world to tell the tale in this issue. Editor Mort Weisinger used them all on the cover. I think this cover had some kind of psychological effect on me as a kid. I was 6 years old when it came out, and my older brother had brought it home from the newsstand. At some point, I took a blue Bic ballpoint pen and traced over the tragic fate of baby Kal-El, as if trying to obliterate his sadness. If memory serves me, it looked a little bit like this. Maybe I had abandonment issues. It was one of the few covers I ever drew on. But to this day, this is just such an iconic cover for me that I had to buy it again many years later, like 60 or so, when I came across a decent, if definitely well-loved copy at San Diego Comic-Con. One final note about this cover: that price box in the upper left, mysteriously exclaiming, "Still 10 cents." To 6-year-old me, what did that mean? Was it a veiled threat, or a nod to my good shopping instincts by picking up this copy before there was a price hike? Soon all comics would cost 12 cents, a 20% increase. The days of 10 books for $1 are over. Comics and magazines were never taxed in the forward-thinking state of Pennsylvania, one of the few forward-thinking things that state ever did, for me at least. Soon it would be 8 books for $1, with 4 cents left over for some penny candy, my first lesson in inflation, and the beginning of my journey to type 2 diabetes. Bye, baby Superman. Safe travels. Oops. While we're talking about the Mort Weisinger edited Superman family books, I find the layouts on this trio of covers to be particularly fascinating, and somehow very pleasing. Superman number 132, October 1959, Superman's Girlfriend, Lois Lane, number 15, February 1960, and Action Comics number 317, October 1964. All 3 covers were penciled by Curt Swan with all that great lettering by Ira Schnapp. Superman 132 and Lois Lane 15 were inked by Stan Kay, and Action number 317 by George Klein. This format was particularly effective when it came to the multi-part imaginary stories Weisinger was so fond of. I don't recall ever seeing any other DC comic with this unusual cover layout, so I'm guessing it must have been a Weisinger thing. I can imagine young me standing in the newsstand breathlessly reading all that cover copy, softly muttering it out loud, no doubt, and being very impatient to get home and read the stories inside. Batman number 156, July 1963, features one of the character's most famous Silver Age pre-New Look stories, Robin Dies at Dawn. It's one of my favorite Sheldon Moldoff covers of this era, inked by Charles Paris. The story, for better or worse, takes place on some alien world where Batman and Robin never should have been in the first place. Welcome to the Jack Schiff edited era of Batman comics. Of course, Robin doesn't really die in Bill Finger's 2-part story with art by Moldoff, albeit with the contractually required Bob Kane signature. Batman just imagines the whole thing as part of some experiment. Interesting side note, this book's first story is called The Secret of the Ant-Man, featuring a diminutive superhero who fights crime with Robin while Batman is away on a top-secret mission, told in the Robin Dies at Dawn 2-part story later in this issue. Except this hero is really a bad guy. Evidently nobody at DC was reading Marvel Comics in 1963. And by the way, this is the book that fell apart while I was scanning it. Guess I won't be slabbing this one. Come on, who doesn't love a wonky Wonder Woman cover? And is there one even wonkier than issue number 155, which introduces Mr. Monster? Cover dated July 1965, because who doesn't love a summer wedding? This Ross Andru and Mike Esposito gem has it all. Stained glass windows, a herd of lovely, albeit shock-looking Amazons, including the whole Wonder Woman family, with my fave, Wonder Tot, out front. And of course, one of the most ridiculous-looking monsters that ever graced the cover of a comic book. Spoiler alert, Wonder Woman agrees to marry Mr. Monster out of the kindness of her heart, as she explains to her justifiably worried mom. We shouldn't judge a person by what he looks like, but how he acts to others. How can we ever become friendly with Martians or people on other planets if we treat them as freaks? Oh, Wonder Woman, I get all misty-eyed just reading that, just like your mom did. Spoiler alert, they don't get married, and all the Amazonians' gifts had to go back. To Amazon, I guess. One could certainly pick just about any Mystery in Space cover that featured Adam Strange as a favorite. Carmine Infantino and Murphy Anderson did all the covers featuring the character from issue number 60 through number 91, and all of them are great, but this one, issue number 90 from March 1964, is my absolute favorite. I particularly love this heroic figure of Adam Strange flying to save Earth, and those 2 headshots at the bottom, which look more Anderson than Infantino to me, are wonderful. This was also a rare book-length story and the last appearance of Hawkman in Mystery in Space. He graduated to his own title a couple of months later in May 1964, after a few issues as a backup feature in this title. This is also the penultimate Julie Schwartz edited issue, as he changed places with editor Jack Schiff on Batman and Detective Comics, taking penciler Carmine Infantino with him. Here are 2 of my favorite Jack Kirby DC covers. The Demon number 1, September 1972, and Commandy, The Last Boy on Earth #1, November 1972, both inked by Mike Royer. DC had canceled two of Kirby's Fourth World books with the 11th issues of New Gods and Forever People, both dated November 1972. But Mr. Miracle kept chugging along to number 18, March 1974. Both those titles were replaced with two new, sensational DC Jack Kirby blockbuster concepts, the supernatural demon and the science fiction-themed Commandy. The demon cover, which appeared first, was a throwback with Frankenstein-like villagers storming the castle, and its supernatural bent harkened back to Kirby's own black magic anthology title in the 1950s, although that didn't have any kind of superpowered demon as a recurring character. Commandy, which appeared 2 months later, took place in a post-apocalyptic future Earth, reminiscent of Planet of the Apes, with talking animals far outnumbering humans after the Great Disaster. I preferred these titles to the Fourth World ones they replaced, and evidently other readers did too. Commandy lasted a very healthy 58 issues, continuing after Kirby left the book with issue number 40 to return to Marvel in 1976. But without the King, Commandy wasn't quite the same. Speaking of Jack Kirby, let's move over to Marvel and a small disclaimer. Some of my all-time favorite covers are by King Kirby, and they appeared on what I view to be his greatest co-creation, the Fantastic Four. In the coming year, I plan to focus a bit on the world's greatest comic magazine. After all, it is the 64th anniversary of the title, and I'm told there's, some kind of movie coming out. Have you heard about this? I'll be doing an episode on my favorite issues of Fantastic Four, which will include my favorite Kirby covers and more Fantastic Four content. So if you feel something is missing here, you're right, but hold on, it's coming. One of my all-time favorite Kirby Thor covers is for this one-shot 1968 Marvel annual, Tales of Asgard, reprinting the first 10 stories from the backup feature in Journey into Mystery. Cover dated October of that year, it's inked by Frank Giacoia and John Verpoorten, and one of Kirby's most powerful depictions of Thor, drawn during his best period of art at Marvel. I absolutely love this cover, and the interior stories focus on Norse legend with that peculiar Kirby Lee interpretation. But it doesn't matter what's inside. This Kirby cover is definitely worth the 25-cent price of admission, all on its own. Of course, we have to include a Captain America cover by Kirby, and here's one of my favorites, issue number 193 from January 1976, heralding King Kirby is back and greater than ever. Inked by John Romita, I find this heavily foreshortened but nonetheless dynamic Cap figure on this cover to be one of Kirby's greatest. When he returned to Marvel from DC, this was the only one of his most famous characters he wanted to tell stories of. Unfortunately, not the Fantastic Four, although he did do FF covers. Kirby's Cap run lasted for 22 issues, ending with issue number 214, October 1977, just shy of 2 years, and included 2 annuals and a brand new Treasury edition, Captain America's Bicentennial Battles in 1976, a book I have, but it's too big for my spinner rack and my scanner. And speaking of Cap, here's one of my favorite John Romita covers featuring the Star-Spangled Avenger, issue number 144, September 1970, with the big split up between Captain America and his partner, the Falcon. This is a weird issue, coming on the heels of those couple of months with August 1970 cover-dated comics, where Marvel went to 25 cents and then abruptly fell back to 20 cents, a bit of Marvel history I'll also be examining in the coming year. There are 2 stories in this issue, both written by Gary Friedrich, with the first 10-page Cap story penciled and inked by John Romita, and the second Falcon story drawn by Gray Morrow, a rare foray into Marvel superheroes for him. That cover, though, is pure Romita, and that new costume for the Falcon sure is spiffy. Romita was great at character design, up there with Kirby and Ditko. Gil Kane was Marvel's go-to cover guy in the early 1970s, especially when Marvel switched to its new Stan Lee-mandated consistent cover format with the August 1970 covers. That layout dropped the famous Marvel corner boxes and featured a large central panel, often with action bursting out of the borders, with Marvel Comics Group emblazoned across the top, above the book's logo, and with the story title or explanatory text below the image, like this cover for Amazing Spider-Man number 104 by Gil Kane. He was, of course, one of the artistic architects of DC's Silver Age revival, penciling the new versions of Green Lantern and the Atom, but he had moved over to Marvel in the late 1960s. Alongside writer Roy Thomas, Kane revamped the rather humdrum Captain Marvel, starting with a spiffy new costume which first appeared in number 16, drawn by Don Heck and Sid Shores, and this barn burner of a cover by Kane for the following issue, number 17, cover dated October 1969. It's one of my all-time favorite Gil Kane Marvel covers. It actually made me want to read this series again. Thomas and Kane stayed on the title for another 3 on-again, off-again issues, leaving with issue number 21, August 1970, when the title was canceled yet again. Kane moved over to Amazing Spider-Man for a nice, long, off-and-on run. This cover, inked by Dan Atkins, features that other Marvel Captain also, Captain America, plus Rick Jones, masquerading as the new Bucky. Always the bridesmaid, Rick would become an integral part of this version of Captain Marvel, at least for a little while, being Mar-Vel's earthly anchor who, with the power of the Negabands, transported Rick to the negative zone and brought Captain America back to Earth, for a time. On July 16, 1968, Hulk King-Size Special number 1 appeared on the newsstands. It's another favorite cover of mine, and one of Jim Steranko's most famous Marvel covers, made even better by his carved-in-stone logo treatment, almost crushing old greenskin. As you probably know, Stan Lee had Maurice Severin redraw the Hulk's face, undoubtedly pissing off Steranko. It's still a great cover, but I see absolutely nothing wrong with Steranko's much more monstrous Hulk, pictured here in its original art. Here are both faces for comparison's sake, turned sideways for better readability, with Steranko's wild Hulk on top and Marie's more on-model one on the bottom. Which is your favorite? Let me know in the comments. Hey, that's the first time I've ever said that on here. Steranko didn't have an exclusive on the carved-in-stone logos. This is one of my favorite Incredible Hulk regular series covers, number 109, November 1968, by Herb Trimpe and John Severin. It appeared on the newsstands just 3 weeks after Steranko's king-size special cover. And like that annual, it's a rare Marvel cover that incorporates both the book's title and the story's title into the artwork. John Severin's inks on this one, and the contrasting light and dark coloring, probably by John's sister Marie Severin, are both spectacular. This cover isn't as well known as the Steranko special one, and Trimpe and Severin also did the interior art, and it's great too. One more little tease for our 2025 content lies in this next cover, a very recent addition to my spinner rack. Marvel started publishing romance comics again in the late 1960s, and this collection of reprinted stories, My Love Queen-Size Special number 1, came out in July 1971, but cover dated for December. It features reprints from My Love and Our Love Story, Marvel's 2 romance series of this era. The lovely cover by John Buscema just drips with equal measures of broken-hearted angst and cheesecake. The book is a treasure trove of great art featuring stories primarily penciled by Buscema. I think there's one by John Romita, plus some inks by him. I've managed to put together a little collection of both the Marvel romance titles, at least the early issues, before they resorted to reprinting and redrawing older stories dating back to the 1950s. The first 6 issues of each title feature some absolutely wonderful art by Buscema and Romita, alongside Gene Colan, Don Heck, and even a story by Steranko. Look for my Love is in the Air episode coming in February, just in time for Valentine's Day. But bring your own tissues and chocolates. There was a time in the early to mid-1960s when it seemed like King Kong was always on TV. I lived in a small town in northeastern Pennsylvania, and we were lucky enough to be one of the first communities to have cable TV. So we had access to stations from Philadelphia, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and the 3 independents from New York City, WNEW, WPIX, and WOR. At the time, WOR was owned by RKO, or at least the remnants of that once great movie studio, now called RKO General, and they made a habit of showing King Kong, an RKO production, at the drop of a hat. I especially remember it being shown on holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. So here's that giant monkey I promised you. Gold Key Comics must have figured there was a built-in audience for the big guy, and they published this adaptation of the movie in August 1968. The cover is by prolific Dell Gold Key cover artist George Wilson, of which sadly little is known, beyond a recent article showcasing his cover paintings in issue number 42 of the British magazine Illustrators Quarterly. This original publication is a 64-page giant classic, costing a whole quarter. Gold Key was also still occasionally doing these pin-up back covers, minus the trade dress, so that's another bonus, alongside no interior ad pages. The authorized adaptation is credited to the 1933 film's producer, Miriam C. Cooper, but written by Gary Poole, who did work for Western and Charlton, and drawn by Studio Giolitti, with pencils by Giovanni Ticci and ink by Alberto Giolitti, who did a lot of work for Western publishing titles published by Dell and Gold Key, including series like Star Trek, Sergeant Preston of the Yukon, and The Lone Ranger's Companion, Tonto. A King Kong treasury-sized edition with the Whitman logo on the cover was also published, I think maybe close to the King Kong remake by Dino De Laurentiis in like 1975 or 76. In an era of no such thing as home video, VHS or DVD, it was great seeing a comic book version of this legendary movie which adhered pretty faithfully to the final film. Flash forward to 1991, and cartoonist Dandy Don Simpson's official adaptation of the fantasy classic for Fantagraphics' short-lived Monster Comics imprint. One of the great bonuses of this series was the 6 covers drawn by some of comics' finest King Kong fans / artists, all of which depicted classic moments from the film. The first one is done by the late, great Dave Stevens, and it's the one we're focusing on here, with the artist's trademark good girl art front and center on the cover, featuring a scantily clad Ann Darrow held in the palm of a leering King Kong. Issue number 2 featured a cover by Xenozoic Tales writer-artist Mark Schultz. Both issues number 3 and number 4 are by dinosaur artist extraordinaire William Stout, with issue number 5 again by Schultz, but inked by comic strip legend Al Williamson. And finally, number 6's cover is by Ken Stacy, featuring Kong's about-to-be untimely demise atop the Empire State Building. That Stevens cover is the best of the lot, though, and the late artist seems to be undergoing a bit of a renaissance right now, with a rediscovery of his numerous covers from Eclipse and Pacific Comics, commanding premium prices at conventions and on auction sites. I don't quite know why, but I love this quartet of Joe Palooka covers. Number 112, number 113, number 114, and number 115, published by Harvey Comics in 1959 and 1960. My favorite is a toss-up between number 113's Prison Break cover, maybe it's Erwin Donenfeld's Purple Cover Theory in action, and number 115, with Joe fighting off a crocodile. Not even the Grand Comics database knows who drew these covers, but I think Joe Simon had a hand in these books, so I'm going to guess either him or former Timely Comics artist Al Avison. These issues are from the end of the Harvey run, right before the quarterly title bumped up to Harvey Giant size and ended with number 18. I've read these and I kind of enjoy the stories, although the boxing jargon and 1930s movie-style tough guy dialect is a bit hard to decipher at times. The Palooka strip was very popular in newspapers, as the covers state over 60 million readers, but creator Ham Fisher was a troubled man. If you have some time, Google Ham Fisher, Al Cap, and read the late comics historian R.C. Harvey's account of the famous feud between the two cartoonists, which ended with Fisher's suicide. Cap was a one-time Fisher ghost artist who went on to create Little Abner, and to be honest, he was no day at the beach either. One of the more sordid stories of comics history, Harvey's article is on the Comics Journal website, tcj.com. And finally, also from Harvey Comics, we have this trio of Dick Tracy Comics Monthly, numbers 129, 130, and 132. I'm currently missing part 3 in this story arc, number 131. These were my favorite comics as a little kid, before the Marvel Age of Comics hit the stands, and I have fond memories of digging them out on snowy winter days, curling up under a blanket on the couch, and reading them with a snack, usually something peanut butter oriented like crackers or Tasty Cake candy cakes, pictured here, and a Coke, in a green glass bottle, of course. These 3 issues featured juvenile delinquent and remorseful murderer Flat Top Jr., the son of one of Tracy's most popular villains, Flat Top, who appeared in the mid-1940s as a hitman hired to kill the hawk-nosed detective. 11 or so years later, in the mid-1950s, Flat Top Jr. appeared, although writer-artist Chester Gould never called him that. This story went on forever in the newspaper comics, lasting more than a year, I believe, until Junior's ultimate demise. I love all 3 of these covers, but especially number 130, which features Flat Top Jr.'s car, this amazing, huge green sedan with front and back bench seats, which had everything imaginable in it, from a working TV set and a refrigerator to a safe and a sink and a hot plate. I always wondered if one of the back seats popped up to reveal a toilet. Harvey published Dick Tracy from 1950 through 1961, and these issues are from the end of that run. Like Joe Palooka, the last few issues, 5 of them to be exact, numbers 141 through number 145, switched to the Harvey Giant format, and they too are among my favorites. Their giant size offered hours of reading pleasure, especially when you were 5 or 6 years old, and they reprinted stories from pretty much my favorite Gould era, the mid-1940s to the late 1950s. I think the Flat Top Jr. issues are also the last of the new reprints, though, with issues number 133 through number 145 reprinting earlier stories that appeared in previous Harvey issues. But here's the best part about one of these comics, number 132. I happen to own the original art for this issue's cover, featuring the shootout between Flat Top Jr. and Dick Tracy in an abandoned movie theater. That's the ghost of the young woman Jr. killed wrapped around his neck. I bought this off of eBay probably around 2008 or so, haunting the auction site as the time ticked down to ending while I was at work at the Comic-Con offices. I got it for $400, and only recently have I learned that it may actually be drawn by John Severin, and I think that cross-hatching on Tracy's suit back is a dead giveaway. The Grand Comics database lists Joe Simon as the cover artist for issues number 129, 130, and 131, so it's possible that this one is also by him, but Severin mentioned he did some Dick Tracy covers for Simon in an interview, according to comics historian Nick Caputa. No matter who drew it, it's one of the most prized possessions in my collection, and really a great cover. So there you have it, a little spin around my spinner rack, and a look at some of my favorite comics on it circa December 2024. All of these covers represent a major reason why I love this era of comics. They just hit me differently than any other era, especially cover-wise. Add to that the fact that I was just a kid and preteen when I first saw them, and they give me a major nostalgic high, something I don't get from today's comics. Hey, I have big plans for 2025, with hopefully a dozen new videos coming your way in the upcoming year, alongside a new look for the channel and my blog over at www.innocent-bystander.com. Here's a little sneak peek at our new look for next season, which hopefully makes you think a little bit about a certain fantastic foursome who will feature a bit in next year's videos. And while I don't want to date any of my videos, I do want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and thank each and every one of you for subscribing and joining me here on YouTube. We're really close to 1,000 subscribers, a number I never dreamed was possible when I started this channel a little over a year ago. Thanks for your ongoing support and wonderful comments, which share your own love of comics. I really enjoy reading them. There are 14 other full-length Tales from My Spinner Rack episodes, featuring everything from a look at Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos to our old DC Comics pals Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane, with, of course, more to come. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Tales from My Spinner Rack videos, and leave a comment if you like what you see. Visit my blog at www.innocent-bystander.com for the first version of Tales from My Spinner Rack, featuring nostalgic essays on the comics I grew up loving, many of which have been adapted to videos here on YouTube. It includes all the books you see here. Each post has tons of scanned artwork, including covers, story pages, and even original art. Just click on any post on the home page and then on Tales from My Spinner Rack in the category list on the right to access all my posts. That's www.innocent-bystander.com. Follow me on Instagram at Tales from My Spinner Rack, it's all one word, or if you want to stalk me personally, follow me at GG92118. I don't do X, I don't do Threads, there is no official Tales from My Spinner Rack Facebook page, and no, I don't really do TikTok. My dancing days are over, and my cooking demos sucked. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the Silver Age of comics. Thanks for watching. Good night.